Beautiful, ancient, unique and amazing island in the Mediterranean, Cyprus. The legend says that the goddess of beauty and love Aphrodite emerged on one of these foamy beaches. Unhurried lifestyle reigns here. It masterfully hides from tourists the scars of ancient bloody vendetta. The country's capital, Nicosia, is still divided by a so-called green line. The buffer zone divides the city into the Greek and Turkish parts. It appeared here in the mid-70s, when the war for the island was raging in Cyprus.
It was a terrible tragedy that is hard to believe. Half of the population was forced to flee. The Turks drove Greeks out of the northern areas. People were forced to leave their homes, thus becoming refugees.
We are ordinary people. What should we do? We want to return to our homes, take care of our gardens.
And these are ruins of one of the houses destroyed during the conflict. A monk walking in the debris has become part of the island's history. Archbishop Makarios was the father of Cypriot independence. For almost 20 years, he has combined his ministry in the church and serving at the highest secular position, the president. Along with the Vatican, it was a unique case of clerical rule in modern European history.
Above all, I'm hoping for mutual and sincere work for the benefit of the people of Cyprus. By the grace of God, happy days will come to the island.
The British, with whom he engaged in negotiations the most often, considered him incomprehensible and dangerous leader of terrorists. For Greek Cypriots, he was a hero and almost a saint, a selfless patriot and a sincere pacifist with an open heart. For Turkish Cypriots, he was a devil incarnate, a bloody monster and murderer. A person evoking so many conflicting emotions could not but deserve an honorable place in the pantheon of Cypriot national heroes. A seemingly unusual combination of churchdom and the presidential post occurred in 1960. By that time, Makarios had been Archbishop of Cyprus for 10 years. That is, he was not only the most important person of the Orthodox Church of Cyprus, but also de facto leader of local Greeks. In the first presidential elections after gaining independence, he won nearly 70% of the vote. The reason for him occupying the highest civilian position dates back to the 16th century, when Ottoman troops dislodged the Venetian state from here and Cyprus fell under Turkish rule for several centuries. To avoid conflicts with Greeks, who made up the majority of the island's population, sultans appointed spiritual leaders of the Orthodox Church as their deputies. Archbishops were tasked with combining church duties and administrative functions of the executive power. The role of the clergy was limited by the British, who after the First World War made a military base out of Cyprus. When the World War II ended, the feel of changes appeared on the island. The clergy became master builders of national patriotism.
I once said at a sermon that we are declaring a revolution, a great revolution. And all people welcomed these words with loud applause. Someone even fired into the air. Then the police came. They wanted to arrest me for incitement. However, people stood up for me and I said I was preaching a great revolution against sin. They stopped short, shocked, and they took a step back. I preached against sin, but I talked about patriotism too.
Yet a completely different reality was hiding behind seemingly careless and joyful celebrations. Cyprus was like a barrel of gunpowder, which could explode any minute. Makarios led the Greeks in their desire to get rid of the British colonial administration.
It was a colonial regime with authoritarian elements of governance. They refused to see what people wanted. And we wanted freedom.
Greek Cypriots, who made up 80% of the island's population, were increasingly concerned with the idea of enosis, the annexation of Cyprus to Greece. The British were the main obstacle on this path. Moreover, London has no plan of losing gates to the Middle East, which Cyprus was for them.
It was difficult for the colonial imperial government to agree to local self-government. Losing grip of the island then seemed unrealistic. Therefore, all decisions on this matter were postponed. The British Parliament claimed that some British dominions would never gain independence.
Turkish Cypriots has a totally different, the third point of view. Even though they were a little more satisfied with the British than Greeks, Ankara was inciting separatism on the island. 20% of the island's population were of Turkish descent. They dreamt of Taksim, which literally means division in Turkish. Considering the small area where Turks lived in the north, this was the part they wanted to annex to mainland Turkey.
British officials asked, "Do you know about the Greek Cypriots?" Attempt to push the idea of Enosis, incorporation, into Greece. What do you think about it? Of course we knew about it. The answer was simple, that we would make sure that the security of Turks in Cyprus was ensured and that we knew about the aspirations to be annexed to Turkey.
Compared to the Greek majority, the British and Turks became situational allies. Britain armed Ottoman descendants and did whatever it could to turn a blow from itself and onto the Islamic minority. Simultaneously, the latter, encouraged both by Ankara and colonial masters, were more and more boldly declaring their dream.
The safety of Turkish Cypriots must be above all. If the Greeks plan to drive us out of our homes through killings and massacres, then it will just force us to seek protection from the Turkish army.
If Makarios was the word of protest, then Georgios Grivas, the founder of EOKA organization, was a sword in the fight for independence. He started a guerrilla war against the British, the island filled with smoke. The Archbishop helped Grivas coordinate attacks both on Turks and on the left-wingers, who were against Enosis too.
EOKA's main target was English and Turkish Cypriots alike. They want to kill as many Turks as possible.
To translate the dream of annexation into reality, the desire of Cyprus was not enough. At first, Makarios requested, then pleaded, and eventually demanded that the Greek authorities supported the union. In Athens, the authorities consisted of particularly cautious Greeks that regarded the island's attempts as an undue burden. Only a few years passed since the British had helped them defeat communists in the Civil War. London was Greece's main foreign partner, therefore Athens did not want to come afoul with such a friend because of a faraway island. Yet Makarios did not give up. He convinced the British to grant a right to a referendum, which showed that most Cypriots wanted to be annexed to Greece. With renewed vigor, Grivas launched a new war against colonial troops in 1956. The British merrily went around the bend because of it. The unrest in Cyprus coincided with the Suez Crisis, the British war against Egypt. To ease tension in the region, Makarios was arrested and exiled to Seychelles. Without its charismatic leader, Grivas's guerrilla army gradually faded away. Upon returning from Seychelles, Makarios once again addressed London and Athens. The Greeks were silent and the British offered their terms. Instead of uniting with the Greeks, Cyprus will gain independence. Second, the British will help draft the constitution and will stay on 2 military bases. When the Archbishop tried to reject the proposal, he was blackmailed. The MI6 threatened with damaging information. They meant evidence of his active homosexual relationships, and Makarios accepted the royal offer. The British forced him to sign a document broadening the mandates of Turks. They obtained their own vice president with the right to veto decisions of the government and parliament. But the Archbishop president did not see the future of his island with the Turks. In 1963, he offered Vice President Fazil Kuchuk to review 13 amendments to the constitution that restricted the rights of the Turkish community. Ankara gave a resoundingly negative response. Riots between Turks and Greeks burst out in Nicosia. This was the first step to the island division. Next year, the situation exacerbated. 2 NATO countries were ready to war, Greece and Turkey. And all of this happened at the height of the Cold War. The conflict was stopped by peacekeepers from England, Turkey and Greece. Makarios found himself facing a difficult choice. He did not have full support from either Britain or Greece. Neither of the two countries was ready to jeopardize the North Atlantic alliance and fight the Turks for the sake of Cyprus. America kept silence too. Washington had other things to worry about. They were dealing with the Watergate scandal. Consequently, His Grace decided to ultimately shift his ground. Moscow became his major partner.
I met with the president of Egypt, Anwar el-Sadat, who is on good terms with both Washington and Moscow. We have agreed to work together to restore peace in the Middle East and to prevent the Cold War from escalating.
For Makarios, such turn to the left led to severed relations with his longtime partners Grivas and Ioka. Since then they had become his enemies and eventually forced His Grace to flee Cyprus. In 1974, he found himself at the death's door. Grivas' friend Dimitrios Ioannidis came to power in Athens. He believed in the idea of enosis too, yet he was some 10 years late. He helped organize a coup d'etat in Cyprus. The National Guard shelled the presidential palace, and Makarios barely survived. While the Greeks were shifting power in Cyprus, no one paid any attention to Turkey. Nobody believed that Ankara would dare to shift from guaranteeing the independence of Cyprus to occupying the island. Nonetheless, Ankara did. Allegedly, the document guaranteeing the independence of Cyprus foresees an invasion in the event of a threat to national security, and Turkey regarded the coup d'etat as such. Military corps of 40,000 landed on the shores of the Greek island and actually split it in half. Turks started driving Greeks out of the north. The situation was changing very drastically and tragically. Nearly 200,000 Greeks turned into refugees, fleeing ethnic cleansing. Makarios ended up in London. From there, he appealed to the world to stop the Turkish occupation.
What upsets me the most is that 24 hours after the ceasefire agreement, Turks keep expelling people and seizing Greek settlements. I think Turkey should start executing their UN decisions.
However, the island and its capital Nicosia were already divided. Over 10,000 tourists were in thrall to an unexpected war. UN efforts stopped Turkey, and Makarios returned home.
It was thanks to Makarios IV that the world did not recognize the annexation of Cyprus by Turkey. The UN has agreed to threat the presence of Turkish troops on the island as an occupation. Makarios insisted that the self-proclaimed Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus was treated as much internationally. It was only recognized by Ankara.
Following the war with Turkey in 1974, Makarios held the presidential office for 3 more years. Cyprus was trying to sit on the fence. With support from Moscow, His Grace joined the non-aligned movement. Along with leaders of Yugoslavia, Broz Tito, and Egypt, Abdel Nasser, he became the leader of this bloc.
Archbishop Makarios has taken a strange position. What he is doing in the path this Mediterranean Castro has chosen is considerably narrowing the US's ability to help Cyprus.
Just like Castro in Cuba, Archbishop Makarios made every effort to build an authoritarian state in Cyprus. Not just security forces, financial and social spheres, but also the media were under his direct leadership. In 1977, Archbishop died of a heart attack. He had 10 days left to his 64th birthday. Doctors reported that the Patriarch's health was ruined by cigarettes. Makarios' funeral was held with royal honors. The coffin was wrapped in the stripped flag of Greece that he had been reaching for his entire life. On the top of the coffin was the flag of independent Cyprus that had started his own history thanks to His Grace. The Greeks lined up to say goodbyes to the Patriarch president. Cypriots threw rose petals at the funeral procession. This was how a myth about a perfect leader of the nation was born. The myth that said nothing about Makarios' responsibility for the conflict with Turkey. Because of his stubbornness and short-sightedness, he failed to integrate Turkish Cypriots into Greek society. Consequences of his radically harsh stance concerning the one-nation state may still be felt on the island. Cyprus is divided into Greek and Turkish parts. Occasionally, new conflicts erupt between Greeks and Turks.